So the first thing it tells me in my procedure is to prepare a 250 ml Erlenmeyer flask, that's this, by adding 50 ml of distilled water and 2 ml of 3 molar sulfuric acid. Also prepare a burette with potassium permanganate for titration. All right, so I'm going to first prepare the Erlenmeyer flask with the acid and water. So I need to measure out 50 ml of distilled water. So the best tool I have for that is simply a graduated cylinder. So I'm going to add 50 ml of my distilled water that I got with a beaker. I'm going to add that to my Erlenmeyer flask. Okay. Then I'm going to measure out 2 ml of the sulfuric acid. Okay. So I'm going to use a volumetric pipette for this because it's such a small volume. It would be extremely inaccurate if I used a graduated cylinder. Okay. I'm going to scroll up to get the volume I want. I'm going to release it until I have 2 with a smaller number. Okay, and I got my volume right there of 2 ml. Okay, I'm going to put that in my Erlenmeyer flask. Okay, and now I'm going to move on to setting up my burette. So remember, after you've set up your burette, proper setup includes washing it with distilled water, allowing that distilled water to run through, okay? Then using your potassium permanganate, pouring a little bit in, allowing that to run through to make sure you're not diluting your solution, and then running through one more time. And then at that point, once you've cleaned out the burette, you know that the only thing that's in there is your potassium permanganate. Then you can do what I'm doing, which is making sure that your stopcock is perpendicular to your burette, pouring in your potassium permanganate. Okay, and just as a review, remember, if you look at my burette, right now there's an air bubble in there. Okay, and what I need to do is I need to allow that air to get out, so I'm going to just have some sort of a trash can, and I'll allow it to run until all I see is purple. Okay, then I'm going to stop it because I know there's no air there. Okay, and before you actually start your titration, you need to make sure to measure the volume of the solution that you have. So if we go around here and we look, it's hard to see because it is purple. Okay, but notice here's the 32 mark. Okay, so remember, you're going to read it like a ruler, so that the volume that you would have will be approximately probably 32.2, I would say. Okay, so that would be your initial volume. All right, so that is my setup for my burette. So now it asks us to measure out 100 ml of dilute hydrogen peroxide and add it to a new clean 250 ml Erlenmeyer flask. So I'm going to measure out 100 ml. In a graduated cylinder. Okay. And then I'm going to add that to a new Erlenmeyer flask. So I've got a new one right here. So I'm going to add that in. Okay, I'm going to leave that right there. It says this flask will be the reaction flask. The one prepared with the sulfuric acid is your titrating flask. So I'm going to actually write on this flask here so I don't mix it up with the other one. This is going to be my reaction flask, RXN, reaction, okay? So that I know that this is where the reaction is occurring. So we're going to be watching hydrogen peroxide decompose, and we're going to be measuring the rate of that reaction by constantly doing titrations. We're going to do a titration every 10 minutes. And so we're going to do a titration in this, using this Erlenmeyer flask in this solution. Okay, so we're going to recreate this solution, right, with the water and the sulfuric acid each time I need to do a new titration. This reaction I'm going to leave alone. I'm going to allow it to react, and every 10 minutes I'm going to take some of that sample, add it to my titration flask, and actually titrate it. All right, so I'm going to leave that right there. So now I'm going to add 6 mils of my iron catalyst. So I'm going to measure out 6 mils into this. Okay. I'm going to add that to my reaction flask. Now that reaction flask I'm going to just leave alone, and what I'm going to be using is this titrating flask. Okay? So I'm going to leave this alone, and I'm just going to take 10 mil samples from it over and over and over again. So I'm going to let that one alone, and then this is the one that I'm going to use to actually titrate. Okay? So as soon as I pour this in, the reaction begins. So I'm going to swirl it, and then I'm going to immediately pour 10 mils into a graduated cylinder and add it to the titrating flask. Then I'm going to start my stopwatch when I begin to add the 10 mils to the titrating flask. At that point, I start my stopwatch. Titrate with potassium permanganate to a permanent purple color. Record the volume of potassium permanganate titrated, then rinse the titrating flask and prepare it again. So keep in mind, this titrating flask, I'm gonna get rid of everything once I'm done titrating it. I'm gonna add water and sulfuric acid to it again, but I'm gonna leave this reaction alone and allow it to occur, and I'm gonna just keep taking 10 mil samples from it, okay? So my reaction is beginning as soon as I pour this, okay? So now I'm gonna add my reaction solution, 10 mils of it, to my titrating flask, okay? Okay, and I set my timer to allow it to start. Now I'm gonna titrate this. Remember, you're going to add it slowly until it seems to hold the color. Okay, and then you add it dropwise until it turns a permanent purple. So as I'm doing this, I'm going to explain what's going to happen. As I'm doing this, my reaction, the hydrogen peroxide, is still decomposing, okay? And you can see it right here, okay? So I'm leaving that, and every 10 minutes, I'm going to do this whole titration process over. So I'm going to re-pour out 100 mils of water, and then my sulfuric acid, and I'm going to do another titration. And I'm going to be being able to measure how much, what concentration of hydrogen peroxide is in the solution still. Okay, you want a permanent purple solution, so you're going to do it till you get a permanent purple solution. Okay, I'm right there, so I've got it. Okay, and you measure the volume that you used. Okay, so after 9 minutes, I'm going to pour another 10 mil sample from this reaction flask into the titration flask. So what I need to do now that I've done this first titration, I've measured my volume, I'm going to take my titrating flask, I'm going to dump the contents of it, I'm going to pour in 100 mils of water again, 2 mils of my sulfuric acid, and I'm going to have it ready to go so that at the 10-minute mark, I can add, well, 9 minutes, but I can add the reaction solution into the graduated cylinder, pour it in, and titrate it again. And you're going to do this for a total of 50 minutes.